dolphins capable of following any boat for many miles help us feel like we belong in some way to life sceneries that we might have thought unreachable. By the mid-19th century, the foreseen end of the Orange economic cycle led the Society for the Promotion of Agriculture in Sao Miguel to search for solutions for the inevitable crisis. The end of that commerce, which enriched many families, had various causes, which went beyond the destruction of the orange farms by the Isseria plague. One of those causes had to do with the new means of transportation, steamships, trains, so there was a need to create easy alternatives for production and exportation. Therefore, new crops emerged, such as tea, pineapple, and tobacco. Throughout the first half of the 19th century, the cultivation of tobacco was prohibited, although there were those who went ahead with small clandestine plantations. Although we know of cigarette handmade production prior to that, Fábrica de Tabaco Miquelense was the first tobacco factory authorized to labor in 1886. In the Azores, the devotion of the Holy Ghost goes back to the time of the first settlers in the islands. The Santo Cristo Lord Christ of Miracles cult was started by the end of the 17th century. For more than 4 centuries, corn was the main food staple of the poor. Beans and pumpkins would often be planted in the same soil as the corn, a practice also used by Mexican Indians. So here is a touch of the history of this people, symbolized by a Holy Ghost flag, a Santo Cristo statue, or a doll made of dried corn leaves. As for the magnificent beauty of scrimshaw pieces, that's pure art, drawn by privileged hands, often remembering scenes from whale-catching adventures. The most famous day of Vila Franca do Campo's history is also the most tragic night of Azorian history. The hills which surrounded the then capital city of the island were made of fragile soil, very recent geologically. On the night of October the 22nd of 1522, a big earthquake caused the collapse of 2 of them, and they fell over the town, destroying most of it. But Vila Franca was quickly reborn. It's possible that no other town in the world may be considered as renaissance as Vila Franca, for 2 obvious reasons. Its rebirth happened during the Renaissance. That's probably the main reason why Vila Franca is one of the most beautiful among Azorian towns and cities, safeguarded from its summit by Senhora da Paz, Our Lady of Peace, in its chapel, and with a charming islet serving as a maritime sentinel. Most notable is the complex which encloses the Sao Miguel Arcanjo Church, with particular proeminence to the Misericordia Church, the City Hall building with the founder's statue, Gonçalo Vaz Botelho, born in Vila Franca de Xira, right in front, and the public garden, where we find a secular dragon tree planted on October the 6th of 1862, the day King Louis I got married. Although its initial origin is the north of India, the word sha, as it is pronounced in the Fujian dialect, te in Mandarin, is associated with China, even in its scientific classification, Camellia sinensis. Having been introduced in Sao Miguel in the 19th century, the Goanna Tea Factory was the only one that lasted until now in constant production, and it is considered the most famous. Tea is connected with the progress of maritime navigation due to the rivalry between the Dutch and the English, which fought for the control of its commercialization. To define the sensation of tranquility and peace associated to this beverage, nothing better than a poem in the Chinese vein. My loved one rests under the shade of the tamarind, the vision of her body on the grass, peaceful as the tea on the wicker basket. Very often, cows are traveling companions on the roads of Sao Miguel. They are also the source of the island's greatest wealth, producing milk which still carries the flavor of the freedom in which they live, fed mainly by the abundant grass of the pastures. Furnas, another masterpiece of the volcanoes, and of the persistence of green on the soil fertilized by their ashes. Their sulfurous hot springs frightened the settlers that thought they might be a door to hell. As a matter of fact, the most frightening of them all is also known by one of the names attributed to the devil, the Pero Botelho Caldeira. Once this myth vanished, there still persisted the belief that the sulfurous fumes could be deadly for the birds and cause serious damage to other animals and people. Afterwards, they ended up being used to boil corn cobs or to peel wickers used to make baskets, furniture pieces, or ornamental artifacts. Taking advantage of the hot soil which surrounds the caldeiras near the lake, the famous cozidos das furnas are cooked. The most common are the Portuguese style and the cod cozido. Curiously, during the times of the first settlements, since there was no clay to make pots, the meat, put inside the skin of the animal or in a gourd, was often cooked in a pit, preheated by a fire. The last furnace volcanic eruption took place in 1630 and caused a few deaths in the southern coast, besides drying a small lagoon in a place which is now called Lagoa Seca, dry lagoon. But the signs of this troubled geological history are nowadays appreciated by many people, who, besides enjoying the taste of the cozidos made in the scorching ground, have the chance to bathe surrounded by nice yam fields in a warm water puddle that has already been named after a Brazilian television soap, or swim in a pool with the same kind of water in one of Europe's most beautiful gardens, or simply fill a teapot or a pan in a natural fountain near home and save on electrical energy and gas for the stove. Often, those who visit Furnas to eat a cozido from the caldeiras use the 5 to 7 hours waiting time until the meal is ready to go swim in the ocean at Ribeira Quente. The road to this coastal village is one of the most enchanting in the Azores. While crossing its 8 kilometers, one is enveloped by luscious vegetation, covering hills, mounds, and mountain streams, with Calibit waterfalls springing here and there on the right side of the road. The village of Ribeiricante is the name of the brook that crosses it, in which is its spring in the place of Águas Quentes, hot waters, the one that people changed for the title of a Brazilian soap. The village space between mountains and sea is so narrow that some small streets, where two people can hardly walk side by side, remind us of an Arab quarter. The beach rests under majestic slopes, and a few meters from the land one can see the bubbles of submerged sulphurous water. Among the various gardens in Furnas stands the Terra Nostra Hotel Garden, started by Thomas Hickling, who left America for political reasons and sought refuge in this island. He ended up being the first United States consul in Sao Miguel, where he left illustrious and educated descendants. The Terra Nostra Hotel Garden, or Park, is one of the best examples of the interest for exotic gardens which began in Sao Miguel during the 19th century. The pool, fed by natural warm water, is located there in the midst of sumptuous vegetation representative of the 5 continents and of the different climatic zones except for the polar ones. One can admire both the magnificent ferns, direct descendants of the first plants with arboreal structure on Earth, and the gigantic Araucarias, or several species of delicate camellias and azaleas. At Furnas, there is one of the greatest concentrations of thermal and mineral medicinal waters in the world. Underutilized for many years, there has been a growing public and even private interest for their use as a soothing cure for some skin and gastrointestinal health problems. Whoever might think that São Miguel's enchantment ends at Furnas is wrong, because there's still Nordeste. This is where the island started being built about 1 million years ago. That antiquity is noticeable in the kind of relief, more eroded than in most of the island, and more majestic also. The mounts reach higher heights, and the sea seems to be farther away, even when seen from the Madrugada, dawn, or Sossego, tranquility, ocean views. As we climb the Truncata mountain view in the area where the Priolo, a unique bird in the world, lives, the landscape is so magnificent that can even be somewhat frightening in the midst of the kind of silence which would be difficult to desecrate voluntarily. With a little bit of imagination, one can almost hear Sibelius' music played on the violin of Ginette Neveu, or Edith Piaf crying a song for her beloved champion, Marcel Cerdan. Marcel and Ginette, as well as the latter's brother, the pianist Jean-Paul Neveu, died in a plane crash at Pico da Vara in the fall of 1949. But Nordeste is above all an expression of life, and it has been honored with a title which still continues to deserve for the most flower-adorned municipality in Portugal. Is it true that only good-hearted people like flowers and take care of them, or it could also be said that flowers shape human sensibility? Nordeste is the distance compensated by beauty and friendship. This is the place where the first settlers set shore, coming from the island of Santa Maria, which stands directly across the ocean and in cloudless days can be seen very clearly. This is where the first human life was born in Sao Miguel. It was named Povoação, village, because it was the only one at the time. Later, it became known as Povoação Velha, old village, but the initial name is the one used now. The religiosity of the people of Sao Miguel is supposed to be sad and fatalistic. Perhaps, sometimes that's the case when the wheel of life crumbles. That's why there's the devotion to the Holy Ghost, to Senhor Santo Cristo dos Milagres, to God, who's the Father, and many of his saints and angels. But to witness the Santo Cristo feast is to be assured that this people's faith lives in hope and partakes of the communion of joy.